Good morning, everyone. I'm Mr. Phan, and today, in honor of Women's History Month, I am going to make a video tribute on the greatest women on earth, Leonor Escobar. Today, we celebrate 10 years of compromise, hard work, and hardships. Given that I am a storyteller, I will share with you 10 stories so that you may understand why Leonor Escobar is the greatest woman on earth. Thank you for watching. Honey, I have chosen to make this video because even though you've only lived on this earth for 26 years, your story is one of both hardship and hope, and is worth telling. I want to let you know that you are the reason I wake up in the morning, the reason for my success, and I thank God every day that you are right beside me. Happy 10-year anniversary, honey. We were in high school, sophomore year of chemistry, ironically, and we were the complete opposite of each other. She sat in the first row, I sat in the last row. She actually paid attention and took notes. I slept. And she always volunteered to hand out papers, stay after class to help clean up. I was the first one out the door. So complete opposites from each other. And for that first semester, we didn't notice each other. I didn't notice her, she didn't notice me. What happened was my birthday's in January, and I remember getting a sky blue jacket. It was either Abercrombie or Eagle Express. It was a beautiful blue jacket. The first day that I wore it, she went up to me. As she was handing out papers, you got a B, you got a C, you got an A, yada, yada, yada. She stopped at my desk, looked at my jacket, and looked at my test score. 100. Yeah, I was that kid. The one who slept and still passed with an A. Sorry. She looked at the test, looked at me, and said, "I like your jacket. Can I give you a hug?" And this was the first time I truly saw her. And I remember the most beautiful black eyes, the kindest smile. And I knew right then and there, I wanted a relationship with her. And that's how we met. So after that day, I started sitting next to her. I started sitting in the front row, much to the dismay of my chemistry teacher. Because now I was still disrupting the class, I was still sleeping, but now I was also distracting her favorite student, and I was doing it right in front of her too. Yeah, she did not like me. Well, even though a few weeks had passed by, I still had not asked her out, and I'm a very cheesy guy. So I wanted the perfect opportunity, the perfect pickup line. I know. High school, right? And that opportunity came. Around Valentine's Day, one of my classes were handing out chocolates. This teacher actually still handed out candy and cards, even though it was still in high school. And I had a bag of chocolate kisses, a handful of chocolate kisses. So I see her, she's sitting over there with her friends, I'm pretty sure it's during lunch, and I remember walking up to her, and I asked her, "Do you want a kiss?" Her friends just froze, and she froze, and I remember, and it's so adorable, her whole face turned red. It's how she got the nickname Fresca, but more on that later. She looked side to side, friend to friend, then down at her feet. She squeezed her lips together, looked up at me and said, "You mean the chocolate, right?" And I just said, "Yeah, the chocolate." She said, yes, please. So I took out the chocolate kisses and I gave it to her. Later that day, I ran into her again in the hallway, and I asked her again, "Do you want a kiss?" This time, she did not hesitate. She held out her hand and said, "Yes, please." This is when I reached in and I kissed her on her cheek. Once again, she turned bright red and ran down the hall. Later, at the end of the day, she confronted me. She went up to me and said, Why did you do that? Why'd you kiss me?" And I told her, "I want a relationship with you. I want to be with you." And she said yes. Now that I think back, this was a pretty clear indicator that there would be friction in the future of our relationship, um, more specifically between Leonor and my mother. Um, Keep in mind, I am Vietnamese and Leonor is Salvadorian. And I cannot say this across all Asian households, obviously, but if you have any Asian friends, they either know someone or they themselves relate to this. But Asian moms are a little bit racist. My mother wanted me to marry someone, date someone who is either white or Asian, preferably from a wealthier background. And this is important for the story. So, come around mid-March, I told my wife, my now wife, then girlfriend, I wanted to meet her parents and I would love for her to meet my mom. And I don't believe in this whole sense of nervousness. I believe it's better to get over that hurdle as soon as possible, and I wanted to meet her parents. So come around mid-March, towards the end of March or so, we arrange a time for us to meet. Now, before we met, our two families meeting, I remember telling Leonor, "Hey, my mom, she's Asian, and Asians are a tad bit racist. And she will no doubt ask you what your ethnicity is. So if she does ask you, tell her you are half-half. That you are half Hispanic and half white. Half that you originate from Spain." And at the time, she didn't understand, and she just gave me this weird face and said, "Okay, sure." And sure enough, when my mom met her folks, I met her parents met my mom, she asked Leo what her ethnicity was, and that's what she said. Let me preface this by saying I love my mother. She did the best that she could, and she was a strong, single mother of 5 stubborn children. But as you grow up, you learn that your parents are not perfect. They are human, and humans have flaws. She was a very strong and ambitious woman, and I remember her telling me about this amazing dream she had. She wanted to start a chain of nail salons and retire. She wanted to make a statement to her family, and take in consideration, we're Asian. We have a very, very traditional mindset. So the fact that she was divorced and a single mother she was not looked upon very well. Let's just say that. Well, my mother was a very, very successful cosmetologist, very good nail tech. And in that field, it is primarily commissions based. So as a result, we were bouncing from job to job, city to city, trying to get the next best paycheck. Well, Mr. Phan, how is this bad? Your mother sounds like an amazing, hard-working woman. And don't get me wrong, she was. But she had a major flaw. You see, she had a talent as a manager and as a boss. And as a side effect of that, she did not take crap from anyone. As you grow up, everyone at least once in their lifetime will experience this. But as an employee, especially in a sales-based field, a commission-based field, you will inevitably run into an incompetent boss or gossipy coworkers or just a variety of people in general. Now, the difference though is the average person would stay calm, bite their tongue because they needed this paycheck. Not my mother. She did not allow anyone to talk crap out of her, any hint of negativity or gossip towards her, and she would explode. As a result, we moved around a lot. I personally ended up attending 6 different high schools. So after my sophomore year of high school in Houston, we moved again. Now, at this point, I've had relationships in the past before I met my wife, and I thought we were done. We were over because I had moved away. You want to know what my wife did? And it still touches my heart to this day. She went out, got a minimum wage job, and when she found out that I moved away, using her money, she would buy Greyhound tickets and come visit us. And taking consideration, we were sometimes 3 hours away, 4 hours away. At one point, we were 6 or 7 hours away. That's driving your own car. That's not with a Greyhound. So she was literally giving up weekends, hours of her life to come see me and my siblings and present presents to us. That's the type of person my wife is. Kind, caring, and loving. Fair warning, these next series of stories are going to get a lot more darker and a lot more depressing. But I want to highlight that Leonor, despite all these struggles that she will go through, she continued to be compassionate, to be caring, to be altruistic. With that said, picking up from where we left off, Leo spent all of her money on presents for my siblings and getting on Greyhound tickets to come visit us. And this really touched my mother. And at this point in time, my mother's relationship with Leo became very, very close knit. It came to the point where my mom, feeling bad for me and feeling bad for Leo, decided no matter where we were, at least once or twice a month, she would try to make a trip to Houston so I can visit and spend time with my wife. Well, through a series of unfortunate events and a bunch of unfortunate incidents, her family and my mom's relationship started to sour. And my mother was a very, very smart, manipulative woman. Now, taking into consideration, since I have moved around so much, she was my authority figure. She was the one person I looked up to. Her word was law. She was God to me. So everything she said, I wholeheartedly believed. Now, Leo at the time was living with her mom and her stepdad. And my mom did not like her stepdad for this reason or another. And slowly she started poisoning her minds against her family, saying that stepdad has ill intent towards Leo and the rest of her family. Looking back now, after getting to know Leo's stepdad, that is not true. But like I said, at this time we were young. Well, anyways, through this period of manipulation and false belief, Leo grew cold with her family grew concerned, and then finally it got to that point, the source of this story, where she decided to run away. And I remember that day very well. Me and my mom were driving back after visiting her in Houston when I get a call saying, "Hey, I've packed all my stuff. I'm tired of being mistreated. I am terrified of my stepdad and his ill intent." Keep in mind, this is the seeds of doubt that my mother had implanted in both of us. "I want to move in with you guys. Come pick me up." I told my mom that, and like I said, my mom at this time had a very close-knit relationship with Leo. So she turned the car around. It was really, really late in the evening, and we drove through through the empty roads to Houston. We're about an hour outside of Houston, roughly, give or take an hour or two. And the entire time I had my phone on, I was guiding her. My mom was telling her, hey, hide here, hide behind the bushes, keep yourself hidden and whatnot. Well, halfway back to Houston, we find out that Leo's parents and her family had discovered that she was attempting to run away. So they took her, basically grounded her essentially, and this started a period of separation for us, where we fought and found anywhere we could, email, another friend's phone, but we had to get creative in trying to maintain contact with each other. Now, despite my wife's family's attempts to keep me and Leo separated, we still managed to maintain contact. We still managed to maintain our relationship, more or less. When she turned 18, me and my wife hatched a plan for her to finally move in with us and finish her senior year with me. Keep in mind that 1, I'm still 17, and 2, therefore I still live with my mother. Now, once again, you can ask your Asian friends about this. I don't know if it's commonplace across the board, but my mother has the Asian belief that the daughter-in-law was responsible for the upkeep and caretaking of the entire family, which means my mother had the expectation for Leo to take care of my siblings, to take care of my mother, and by take care, that doesn't mean just do the chores, that also means helping out financially. My wife left her family, her friends, and everyone she loved to be with me, and I had foolishly dragged her into my definition of normal, which is a household where yelling, demeaning comments was commonplace. A specific story that comes to mind is the day of our graduation ceremony from high school. Me and my wife, we already bought our robes and we were excited. After all, this was a major milestone. We were finally going to graduate and we wanted to go to the graduation ceremony. And due to circumstances, my mother we didn't have the means for me and my wife to go to high school prom. So we really, really wanted to have a great high school ceremony. Well, the weekend of that ceremony, my mother told us that we were moving again. She found another place, another home, and we would probably not be able to attend our ceremony. And I remember that day very specifically. We woke up at 7 a.m. and it was a relatively hot day. We were in the back of a U-Haul, moving the boxes in, putting all the furniture away, while my siblings were waiting in the U-Haul or in the car in the AC. And here we were, me and my wife, irritated, ticked off, when we should be very excited, when we should be at the graduation ceremony. Well, after 1 or 2 hours of this, in which we got most of the work done, my mom had one of her moments in which she changed her mind and said, hey, if you guys finish everything within the next hour, I think we'll still be able to make your graduation ceremony. So me and my wife, we now had a smile on our faces because we thought we were going to miss our graduation ceremony. So we quickly rushed, got all the boxes into the moving truck, and then as soon as we did that, we quickly hit the showers, 5 minutes each, put on our robes, and raced over to the ceremony. Now, as I mentioned, I have moved a lot, so I had no real friends, no real connections here, and my wife had recently left her family, her friends, to move with me, so she also didn't have the opportunity to develop friends in high school. And I remember, as they called my name and I walked across that stage, the only person that clapped for me, that cheered my name, was my wife. Right after that ceremony finished, We took off our robes. We had obviously a t-shirt and shorts underneath, hopped into the moving van, and drove away to our next home. And I'll tell you something, that was quite the sacrifice for both me and my wife. And I made a promise that day that we will never bring in another child until me and my wife were stable, so that we can do what is expected of a graduation ceremony. Lots of friends going to the graduation, and then afterwards have a dinner or a meal or a party or something. And by all means, our children in the future will not spend their graduation day packing up a moving truck. Between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college, my mother's opinion of Leo greatly soured. My mother allowed me to go to college, but did not allow the same thing for Leo, unfortunately. So Leo, because she needed the paperwork which my mom held on to as a form of blackmail and control, Leo had to start working, and it came to a point where she was working 2 jobs at a time, making minimum wage, and coming home to a toxic environment with my mother. Well, one of the things that my mother decided to do as punishment for whenever I didn't meet her expectations, such as trying to call her every single day I was off at college, or whenever Leo did something that did not meet her standards, my mother came out with the horrible punishment of dropping her off at a shelter, homeless shelter, for a period of time. 2 memories come to mind in relation to this. The first memory that came to mind was one day I forgot to call my mother for the whole week. After all, I'm a freshman in college. I am exploring new things. I am trying new things, joining different activities, organizations. I was trying to be busy, trying to learn and live my life. And because of that, my mother drove, at this time it was about 3 hours away from where I went to college. She drove 3 hours, had all my wife's stuff, dropped her in the side on the curb in front of my dorm, called me, forced me to come out, and said, "If you do not bring your wife back home today, I am kicking her out, or I will force her to go back to her family." And remember, at this point, she had manipulated us to going back to her family was a horrible punishment. And unfortunately, since Leo was not at the college campus, in my weakness and stupidity, instead of finding a solution to keep her, instead I went to my roommate, my dorm roommate, because I did not know how to drive yet, and we drove her 3 hours back to my mom's house. And there I had to get on my knees in the yard outside, apologize for being a disappointment to my mother, kowtow before her, and my mother took Leo back. And it was at this moment that I would fight for the quickest opportunity for me to take her and rescue her from my mother, to take her from this toxic situation. This was the first time, and like I said, my mother to this point was God to me. She was everything to me. This was the first time that I realized this was not a good place for my wife to be. A second memory in relations to this story is not long after that, she was once again put into a homeless shelter. And this was actually around my birthday. Like I said, despite all of this horrible crap being tossed towards her, despite this toxic environment that she was living in, and she still made me a slideshow for my birthday. For my birthday, I got an email with a cute little slide that she made in the shelter, showing that she still loved me, that she still cared for me, and that she was still fighting for this relationship. And I'll be honest, y'all, I broke. And this is one of the reasons why my wife is the greatest woman on earth. Tell me another woman who would willingly basically be tortured and mistreated for her boyfriend at the time that may or may not stay with her. She was a much stronger woman than anyone else I have met. And this is one of many reasons why I love her. During that summer between my freshman and sophomore year of college, I came home with a mission on my mind. I'm going to get my wife into college and out of my mom's grip. And I was horrified when I came home. My wife was working 14 hours a day at 2 fast food jobs, making minimum wage, paying all the bills, while my mother, she had basically become a stay-at-home mom, leeching off of my wife. It was horrible. So for that summer, little by little, I got access to the safe, and I slowly got all the paperwork that all my wife's paperwork that my mother was holding to manipulate and control my wife. And this memory may be a bit petty, but it was one of my favorite memories of our relationship. We got the admission letter back that said Leo had been accepted into the same college that I was going to, the college that she wanted to go to. And the look of joy and relief on her face, she basically knew that she was about to be free from her toxic prison. And ironically, later that day, my mother also found out. Her face was complete opposite. She was red with anger and hatred. How dare I go behind her back? How dare I release this woman from her grasp, who was allowing her to be a stay-at-home mom, allowing her to do her own thing, allowing her to not work, not be responsible. So that night, she made an ultimatum. I had 2 choices: my wife or my mother. I chose my wife, and I have never regretted it to this day. We were finally both in college. For the first time in our entire relationship, it was just me and my wife. No families, not her side of the family, not my mother. It was finally just us. And the transformation on her face was miraculous. She went from an empty, hollow shell of her former self to having the joy back in her eyes, to having a bright smile, to having color in her skin. But unfortunately, that does not last too much longer. You see, this was the junior year of college for me. So me, my wife, and one of my buddies, we decided to rent a house, and we had a extra bedroom, which was originally going to be used as a game room because I'm a nerd. Now, unfortunately, my mom, in order to make ends meet, started getting affiliated with the wrong crowds, specifically other Asian men who were gang affiliated. So in her moment of wisdom, my mother showed up to my house one day with my younger siblings with their stuff, and dropped them off and asked me and my wife to take care of them for a little while so that she can get rid of her then boyfriend and try to get herself back on her feet without the burden of having children. Like I said, it was very wise of her and mature of her to do, but for me and my wife, it was an unpleasant and unexpected change in our lives. Obviously, my roommate wasn't too happy. My wife wasn't too happy. I wasn't too happy. But you guys, you know what she did? She stepped up. Leonor stepped up to the plate, didn't let it bother her, and helped me raise my siblings. To this day, I still take care of my siblings. And at first, when I had them, I was obviously mad. I was still a child. I was still in college. All of these new issues popped up. I was essentially a parent, a custodian at the young age of 21. And my wife got me through that. She helped change my mentality to where my siblings aren't a burden, but an opportunity to learn, to grow, to develop myself. And also, I got to learn to love my siblings and love the person that they were turning into. Basically, I got to see my siblings grow up as a parent. Now put yourself in my wife's shoes. You had just lived with your significant other's mother, your mother-in-law essentially. She has manipulated you, she has verbally abused you, and she has ditched you whenever any opportunity arises at every single homeless shelter she can find. Now, most women in that situation reasonably would have left their significant other just because of that horrible monster-in-law. But she stayed around. She continued to fight for our relationship. But she didn't just do that. You see, it would have been also very reasonable if she decided to cut off all contact with my mother, to never forgive her, never see her as a human being, as another person, as another equal on this earth again. But not my wife. The reason why she is the greatest woman on earth was she was able to forgive my mother. Despite all the transgressions against her, my wife still wanted to form a relationship with my mother. She simply wanted a period of time, several years, in order to stabilize herself, build a foundation, and then give both of them the opportunity to mature before hopefully coming together and reconnecting. What an amazing woman. However, fate would not be so kind. On Easter Day of 2022, my mother would pass away from carbon monoxide poisoning, alone in a broken down car, hundreds of miles away from the nearest family member. And I remember that day of the funeral, after flying over to where she passed away, holding her memorial at one of the local funeral homes. And obviously everyone that was family, everyone that was close to her was crying, was grieving, was comforting each other. But my wife was too. In fact, even though she wasn't the loudest or most vocal crier, she was clearly one of the in the most anguish, the most anger and irritation. After that ceremony, after the funeral service, I took her aside and asked her, "Why are you crying? Why are you upset? Are you not relieved that this horrible monster-in-law who has manipulated you, mistreated you, disrespected you, are you not upset that she's gone?" And my wife said no. She reiterated, she said, "I wasn't lying to you. I wanted a relationship with your mother, a healthy relationship. And now I will never get that opportunity again." That is the type of person my wife is. Kind, altruistic, compassionate, and caring. That is what makes my wife the greatest woman on earth. Leonor, you are the greatest woman on earth, not because you fought and won multiple battles, not because you were a queen that manipulated the king, becoming the true de facto ruler of a nation, but because you were able to forgive the unforgivable. Because despite all the hardships, the depressions, the periods of heartache that you went through in your short 26 years of life, you still maintain who you are. A beautiful soul on the inside and a beautiful person on the outside. And I am so thankful for having you by my side. To everyone else who watched this video, thank you so much for watching. I hope you understand now and agree with me when I say Leonor Escobar is the greatest woman on earth. And even though she is relatively unknown, as is myself, I promise you, both me and her will be someone. That the early chapters of our life, the prologues of our story, is only the beginning to an amazing tale to follow and to hear about. Have a wonderful day.